Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno-jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Welcome. My name is Mike Yost. I am your host, and I'm excited that you could join us here today for the next installment of the Sesame Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live series. In each episode, we challenge ourselves and our guests to think differently about smart manufacturing. So far in this series, we have heard from Sesame members and thought leaders that smart manufacturing should be considered a corporate mindset along the same lines as safety and quality are considered. We've discussed the convergence of IT and OT. We've talked about sustainability in manufacturing, the potential power of AI in manufacturing, and continuous improvement. So today I'm thrilled that we're going to be talking about manufacturers taking charge of their own path forward in smart manufacturing by leveraging some of the tools from Sesame, their Sesame acceleration framework and road mapping tools. So joining me today in the studio are Jennifer Nemeth, the manager of data and digital factory at MSA and Safety Company. Welcome, Jennifer. We also have John Whirling, who is the solution architect, mission ops at MSA. Welcome, John. And we have Sherri McCleary, who's the executive director of Digital Foundry at Penn State, New Kensington. Welcome, Sherri. Thanks for being here. Should also mention that Sherri and her group are a regional innovation center for Sesame. So these are the folks that we all want to hear from, and we'll get to them in just a second after I just handle a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you don't know Sesame, you should. Sesame is the National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. It's a public-private partnership and a membership organization that is doing technology research and creating educational content on the smart manufacturing space. We're also working to build the smart manufacturing ecosystem, which we are all hopefully a part of. And this series would not be possible if it was not for the support of Sesame's partner, SME, who is co-producing these events along with Sesame. So our goal with this webinar series is to zero in on a different way of thinking about leadership, thinking about technology, thinking about being a modern day manufacturer, and thinking about what's possible. So we are streaming on LinkedIn Live, and we welcome your comments and your questions. We will take questions and fit them into the flow of conversation if and as they fit. If we don't get to your question, you can just blame it on the host. The event is being recorded, so you can watch this again and again as many times as you like. And lastly, we invite you to get to know Sesame on LinkedIn and also on their website at sesame.org, where you can learn about their mission and about their membership models, learn about their research, education, and much, much more. So with that, let's get on with the show. We're going to talk about the path forward at MSA in collaboration with the Sesame ecosystem to build out their smart manufacturing strategic roadmap. So welcome, everybody. I'd just like to ask each of you to introduce yourself, maybe tell a little bit about your role and your organizations, and then we'll jump into more specifics about the topic here. Jennifer, you want to start, introduce yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure, Mike. So good day. Thank you, Mike. I am Jennifer Nemeth. I am the Digital and Data Factory Manager here at MSA. I'm part of the Operations Technology Group. So this is a new group within our company that has been formed. And with that, we're really partnering with Sesame, the Digital Foundry, to really create, like you said, that technology roadmap for operations specifically and in that factory of the future. I've been with MSA for 10 years. MSA is in the safety industry, so we make anything from fire service. We dress the firefighter head to toe, so anything from the actual hard hats to their turnout gear to the shells, the apparatus that they're wearing into the fires. We make portable fixed gas detection. So it's really, you name it, around the safety industry, and that's what we do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. John, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I'm a solution architect for Mission Ops. I am part of the IT group at MSA, but I'm Jen's chief collaborator for the IT OT convergence. But in my background, most of my background has been in operational excellence, and that was intentional on MSA's part to get somebody with a manufacturing background. Although before I joined MSA just this year, at the very beginning of this year, as a part of their digital transformation journey. But in the last several years before I joined it, I was much more on the data analytics and technology side. So I have a little bit of a background on both sides of the OT-IT spectrum.
Outstanding. Appreciate that. I should also let everybody know that our three panelists are in the same room together working on a project at the Digital Foundry. So glad to have you all in here working together. Sherri, you want to introduce yourself and the organization?
Sure, happy to do that. So as you said earlier, I'm the executive director here at the Digital Foundry. We're an initiative of Penn State, the new Kensington campus. We sit just outside of Pittsburgh. And we were established with, I always like to start with our vision. Our vision is to improve lives and strengthen businesses through access to digital technologies. And we do that through three primary missions. One is working with companies like MSA, local manufacturers, to help strengthen their journey into smart and digital manufacturing by providing technology assistance. And that ranges everywhere from doing assessments of where are they today and where do they want to get to doing kind of prototype systems and demonstrations and helping them to de-risk and understand before they make investments on what that technology can do to help them. The second piece of what we do, the second mission, is around workforce training. And we say we like to touch the entire pipeline of talent. So we do everything from partnering with some local programs that Penn State New Kent already has in K through 12 school districts, to programs for our university students, to some very unique workforce training that we've developed that spans from entry level in the manufacturing field all the way up to engineers who have been in the field for some time. So we're giving different levels of content to help them in their personal journey and growth in smart and digital manufacturing. And then the third piece is just generally to be a catalyst for networking across the community, bringing in a community that's very much a typical Rust Belt story, where it was a community with a tremendous manufacturing legacy that saw a terrific decline when manufacturing pulled out. So we want to bring this community into the fold. We want to catalyze the conversation between educators and industry to make sure that so many of us have a common mission, that we're all trying to move in the same direction, even though we speak different languages. So I come at this from the perspective of having spent over 30 years in industry myself and seeing the struggles and the ups and downs from a technical standpoint, but often even bigger from the standpoint of implementing change and a cultural movement when you start to implement new technology. So myself and the team here all comes with decades of experience in industry, and we want to bring the benefit of what we've learned, the good and the bad, to help companies accelerate their journey and learn from some of the things that we wish maybe somebody would have told us 10, 20 years ago. So,
well, thank you for that. And Sherri, maybe I'll stick with you with this first question, because I think you brought up a number of things that resonate to me. And we talked about this before we went live. The importance, I believe, in having a common language, having an approach that people understand, and being able to give the tools to the manufacturers to own this journey, I think is really, really critical. So I've been around Sesame for a long time. I believe in what they're doing from a national level. But I think it's really important to have that connection to regional groups like yourself, and have that connection with the community, because that's what this is about, right? We bolster up the manufacturing base, which helps bolster up the communities, is a strong, thriving economy. That's the promise of what this whole smart manufacturing thing's all about. So could you maybe just talk a little bit about how Penn State New Kensington, Digital Foundry got involved with this specific initiative? Because I know it's part of a larger plan of how you're partnering. You have these goals. You've been around, I think, longer than Sesame's been around. So how does Sesame's mission align with what you're doing and the tools here specifically, and how you bring that to folks like MSA?
So actually, we've not been around longer than Sesame. When I was with Alcoa, we were one of the original members of Sesame, so I was involved with Sesame from its birth. But the concept for the Digital Foundry actually came out of a conversation I was having with the chancellor here at Penn State New Ken when I was still in industry over 5 years ago, talking about how we were going through this digital transformation. And that if he really wanted to be preparing his students and investing in the community, which were both initiatives of this campus, that we needed to be looking at how we could be preparing them better for this Industry 4.0 or this kind of wave of digital transformation. And so that was kind of where the birth of the idea came from. And we just moved into our building a year ago, June. So we are still a fairly young organization. But the concept for this, again, came out of how do we bring together education industry in a way that's really investing in the future of the economy and the region and the place that we call home. And so Sesame, as I said, I had a lot of history with them as we became one of their SMICs, one of their regional innovation centers.
Yep.
And they were rolling out some of these tools. Again, having been on the other side, trying to go through this journey without some of those things available to us at the time, I'm like, we need to figure out how to get in on the ground floor, how to use this, because that is what we're all about, is how do we accelerate that journey for others, and how do we do it in a way that it's they still own it, that we are facilitating and we are educating, but it's still their story, their journey. And I tell these guys from MSA when we're going through this stuff all the time, you own this, so we're going to help you get through it. But at the end of the day, you're the ones that have to carry this forward. You're the ones that have to live with this. You're the ones that have to sell this to your leadership and to your teams. So I think it's a great tool set to do just that, facilitate and educate in a way that allows the manufacturing team to get there quicker.
So let's stick with that. How did you position this with MSA? What was the value proposition? Like, how did you get to the point where you're helping with this framework and engaging in the role that you just articulated? And then let's talk with the group about how they received it and sort of the work that they've been doing with the project.
So to MSA's credit, they had already started to form a team, to have a leadership group that was focused on this, to recognize that this was something that was important to their future. So they were doing assessments of who's out there that we can partner with that can help us in this journey. And we were fairly new and in their backyard. They have a couple of major operations within a few miles of us here in the Pittsburgh region. And so they came and spoke to us and kind of told them the story I just told you. We were coming at this having lived through this ourselves. We can help you with the benefit of what we've learned. We have tool sets that we can use to help you through the process. At the end of the day, we're not going to tell you who you should work with, but we're going to tell you what we can offer. And just like with the journey itself, it's up to you where you want to go with it from there. So I think that it resonated with the team, not only the tools, the experience set, the approach we were taking, but also the fact that we were very clear that our approach was that you own this.
Yeah. So Jennifer, are you the one that picked up the ball and ran with it, or how?
No, actually, so I joined the operations technology group in March. So it was right after the ball had actually gotten started with the Digital Foundry, and right away, we started using their space, coming here. Just it created an off-campus spot that really gave us that growth mindset, seeing the possibility, is talking about this framework that really is what we honestly needed. We needed to have this common language, this common ground, this common structure where folks that were in OT, IT, engineering, data, whatever part of the company was, we were all working towards the same exact roadmap, the same framework, the same language. And this really gave us the opportunity to start doing that.
And if I could add, I would say that there was kind of three things that were particularly appealing to working with the Digital Foundry, because we had talked with several systems integrators, and of course they wanted to give us the roadmap, but we wanted somebody who was independent and technology agnostic, who was really going focus on best practice and have that experience. But the other benefit is when you're setting this big picture vision and you have to bring multiple stakeholders across multiple functional groups, it really helps to have an outside facilitator to make sure that the conversation is equitable and fair, and then everybody gets a say, and that everybody understands it. And then, just as Jen said, brings us back to that common language. So there was a couple of things. And then, of course, I think Sherri's team had been through this. Sherri herself, obviously, but even her team had been through this before. So having those, somebody who had been through it, somebody who was kind of technology agnostic and best practice focused, and also just the benefit of an outside facilitator to gain consensus internally is really helpful.
So I guess I'm not sure who to ask this. So where are you in the process? Like, so are you done and you've reached full maturity, and or are you still early on in the process of working through your road?
So I can start with kind of where they are with respect to the tool set itself, and then I'll let MSA speak because they have a better perspective of where they're going from there. But we have gone through the front end where we did the online surveys. They had a tremendous response of over 200 folks across their organization who responded. We did the in-person interviews with a leadership group that they selected that ranged from all different functional aspects of the organization all the way up to their top leadership in the company to bring in that focus and perspective and dig a little deeper. We started the process then through in-person brainstorming sessions that we're doing here of bringing their team together and now taking the outputs from all of that and saying, where are the common themes? Where are the common challenges, and what opportunities can we pull out of these, and how do we start to prioritize those? So we're at the stage where we've gone through all of that, and we're starting to narrow in on their key priorities for what they will focus on in the next 1 to 2 years, and how they'll start to pull projects, actionable projects out of that background. So we're not done with them yet. We're not ready to push them out on their own yet. But I think that they've made some tremendous progress, and I'll let them speak to where they are with respect to where they want to be.
Right. Yeah. So I think as overall, the roadmap is really our main goal out of this, right? Getting everybody aligned to it. So we have a clear scope of work that we want to all be working towards. And like we've been saying, speaking that same language, using that same framework. I think just even with that, it was really eye-opening as we went through. I think I should just touch on when Sherri was talking about the tools and the framework and just starting back at the data, right? Like actually going through and having over 200 people that took this survey and then having these individual interviews. I think a part of this process we have done converging and diverging and changing some things in this roadmap. So initially where we started isn't exactly, I think, what we thought the true themes were going to fully be, because as we're getting this data, as we're discussing this and all of our different functions and collaborating together, we really have done this whole diverge and converge with the roadmap. So we're finally at the piece where we're really working towards getting those final themes, putting some scopes of work together for the next 1 to 2 years. And that's really where we want to be so we can start hitting the ground running.
John, anything to add from your perspective on the ops side?
I mean, I think Jen said it. I think, some of the interesting benefits in the process so far, it was really looking at the results of the surveys and the interviews and the way they found feedback is how I think perception across the company was pretty aligned, from top to bottom, from and then across functions about where we are and what our challenges in front of us are. Getting consensus about what we do about it exactly and where we head next is a little bit different, a little bit more of a challenge. But I think it was even just reassuring and understanding that people did have common understandings. And I think these challenges are, they're very common. They come from a company growing and doing different technologies over the years. And they come from the fact that the technology landscape is changing dramatically every day. And I just think a common understanding about where we were and what we need to tackle was really enlightening and reassuring in a lot of ways that at least we were level setting about where we're beginning.
So Sherri touched on a bit, and you two are both talking about sort of the process overall. And I hear a lot of people out in industry talk about assessment, and that's not the goal here of what you're doing. Right? You're working to build a roadmap, right, and to have an iterative process that you can own and you can continue to evolve over time. But maybe just to take a step back and talk about that first step. You talked about over 200 people giving their input. Could you sort of frame up for somebody that hasn't been through that process? Like, what's it like to take that assessment? Like, how is it framed? I don't know, Jennifer, from your perspective, as far as how it was received within your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first part of it, right, we wanted to see as a group, we have a cross-functional group that's actually working on this. So we established that pretty early with different people throughout the organization that is on this key team. And we did it first, actually, to see what it's all about. What are we sending out to MSA and throughout the organization to truly understand it? And it was very easily understood globally. It was quick. Like, that was one thing, because everyone's really busy, right? The day-to-day, the grind of everything that's going on. We wanted to make sure it was something that set realistic expectations and we are getting the right feedback and the feedback we needed. So we did that up front. We actually vetted it and made sure. And then when we sent it out, I mean, we were honestly shocked. I think we thought we would get about 100, and to get closer to that over 200 was great. To see the engagement. And I think that also speaks on our behalf too, just this organization and really what everybody wants to work towards in building that factory of the future. And that's, I believe, truly why we got so much feedback as well into this, because everyone does want to move forward and is excited about this. So overall, though, it was very simple, easy, and accepting. So
then, Sherri, from your perspective as facilitator, then you have this assessment, 200 inputs from across the company. Then that becomes a foundation for you to facilitate conversations about how the company is looking at a bunch of different areas of their business. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. And as Jennifer said, a lot of it was looking for where are you all having kind of this same aligned perspective versus where are you diverging, and are there functional groups that are outliers, and why are they outliers? Which is why then the next step of those interviews becomes very important, is to understand the similarities and the differences. In their case, they were incredibly well aligned. Everybody was on the same page with what they do well and where they have opportunities for improvement and what they think their priorities were. And the interviews as well just reinforced a lot of what we were hearing from across the organization. So again, they had the advantage as an organization of not having too many outliers and too much kind of dispersed data, that it was easier to kind of bring everybody onto the same page.
So that, John, you're the tech guy in the room here, right? So the whole survey, everything, all the conversations around technology, right?
No, definitely not. But it's interesting you bring that up. It's funny. I tell Jen this all the time. I'm not used to being called the tech guy, but at MSA, I'm kind of the IT guy, and that's for sure. And I think that's a really interesting part. I mean, it's an interesting time in MSA's history. We're over a century-old manufacturing company that, we've always advanced technology. We like to tell the story that we literally replaced the canary in the coal mine as the technology for miner safety. But we're at a point in our company's history where we're intentionally accelerating the use of digital technologies in our products as well as our process, which is a big driving reason why our connected products and we have software as a service. It's a big one of the driving reasons of why we're doing this. But what's interesting is in that transition, we're bringing in a lot of outside talent that has a different set of skills and a different mindset. And, you had mentioned having a common language, but it's interesting to me as somebody who's sitting at that convergence, how even though there's so many common topics like lean and agile are based in so many of the same things, but manufacturing people use Japanese words and acronyms, and technology people have their storytelling, the things they say in agile and all of their own acronyms. And they really speak different languages and have different cultural drivers just to where they come from the market space. And so to me, whereas we level set on where we are in the beginning, what was really interesting is when we brought a lot of the technology side people into the convergence part of this to start getting our arms around what do we need to do that was in common. And I think it was really valuable. And I think it was really eye-opening to get both the technology side of the business and the manufacturing side of the business in a room together to think about where should we be prioritizing our focus and our time. And, had we not facilitated in that way, I don't know that we could have agreed upon the priorities we're agreeing upon now and that we're finalizing. So, I mean, it's been a really enlightening process. I think culturally, right? And I think all organizations going through this are going to have some of this challenge. The language of technology and the language of manufacturing, there's a lot of overlap, but, we have to figure out how to reconcile that to go forward in a way that we're one and the same. I mean, even Sherri and I were talking today about digital transformation and lean. Historically, they've been separate because your digital process and your physical process have not been aligned. But if they're aligned, they're really the same thing. Digital and lean are really the same process. And one of the things we love about the Digital Foundry is that they really embed their process into the best practices of process improvement in general.
And that's been a regular theme that we're hearing on this series as well, the focus on operational improvements and then aligning the digital tools with that. And I think to your point, John, I'm not as big a fan of having a definition of smart manufacturing as I am of, I think, the way that the acceleration framework frames up what smart manufacturing can mean to an organization. So it's looking at your strategy and leadership, right? It's looking at your company culture. Do you have data-driven processes? How do you treat your people, right? And there is a technology component, but it's not just about, the technology side of things. So,
and Mike, I wanted to jump in on that a little bit because you're bringing up a really great point in, the questions you were asking, John. One of the things that, and we had to keep, we as engineers, and I can say that because I am one, we always want to go down in the weeds, solving the problems, getting to the what are we going to do? We want to jump into executing. And we had to keep bringing the team back around to, it's about the why. You have to define the why before you can define the what. And you can't go off running down the path of trying to define the technology and define the, the vendor you're going to work with and define the specifics of how you're going to implement it until you can clearly articulate and win the support of your internal team and your leadership because you understand why you need to do this as an organization and you can articulate that and you're on the same page. So always bringing it back to the why are we doing this? And there's a cultural element and there's a leadership element, as you said, and there is a huge element of what's the business value? What's the value to your employees? What's the value to your customers? And if you can't articulate that, then you probably shouldn't be out chasing the technology. Right. So that's, I think, a big part of that facilitation because, we as a group of mostly engineers want to jump down in the weeds on solving the problems before we've fully defined the problems. So.
Right. Well, that's excellent. So are there, I know you're still working through the process. Do you have anybody have an example of either a successful outcome or some learning that has emerged so far through this process that you're able to share? Nothing proprietary, obviously.
I think a big thing for me, honestly, is just back to the collaboration that this has created. So I think there's pieces, that common language we keep saying throughout this, but there are pieces or light bulbs that haven't gone off in some parts of the organization's head until we've gone through some of the structure. So I saw right after we did the report out from CESMII, where we actually looked at all of the questions and the data that came from them, and then the interviews themselves. And we started going through some of that brainstorming. The Digital Foundry, not being biased, was helping us really just be open-minded, no idea is a bad idea, and having that freedom to start putting it up. We really started to align on some things that there wasn't before. There wasn't necessarily, I'll just use an example, IT may have thought of something different than operations, right? But we were saying the same thing, just saying it differently. And I really believe it has helped create this collaborative alignment that we're all working towards. And that was one area where I just really felt like over the last 3 months, the synergy there, the team all working together, it was a changing moment for me in this process.
Excellent. John or Sherri, anything to add as far as a learning or an outcome to this point?
I mean, I guess I would just say through this process is Jen and I work very close on this and are thinking about this every day. And every time we try to engage the larger audience, we have to remind ourselves that we can't expect them to come to the same conclusions that we have gathered through months of research in 20 minutes. And so the facilitation of that to make sure that it's really important to gain buy-in. And even if sometimes the facilitation process validates the conclusions that you have already come to as one of the people working closely, that is actually a win. That's a really important piece because it's helping you to gain buy-in towards where you're going. So to me, that was absolutely, I think if you're the one charged with executing this on a day-to-day basis, you have to remember that you can't get too far ahead of everybody else. We're very aware that we're setting precedent and making decisions that impact a wide variety of stakeholders and potentially for years to come. So we have to make sure that we do our homework and that we bring people along as well. And I think this process has been very helpful toward that end.
It's been reaffirming too, that like what we are doing and how we are working towards this is, I mean, we could be running off and just starting to do all these things separately, but long term, we're not going to get where we want to be. And I think we all have that common understanding now in a line here as well, just to add to what you were saying, John. So.
Yeah, and actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask was about the role of coaching and the nonprofit partner that you have there, and Sherri and the university and the Foundry and all that stuff. So Sherri, you're not in there advocating for a technology, advocating for a particular solution set. So how important is it that maybe from both perspectives, Sherri, you first, that your perspective, I guess, what is it that you're advocating for if you're not running in there trying to sell them a bunch of robots or automation or databases or whatever?
We're really advocating for long-term success for the businesses we're working with and for their employees, that we're giving you tool sets that will help you to sustain this growth going forward. And like I said, helping you to accelerate it, helping you to learn from what we have maybe learned in the past. Having been a part of a larger organization where we had a lot of assets and teams of engineers and people who were internal advocates for what you were trying to do, that you could throw at solving the problem. When we started this whole journey, it was really about recognizing that who's that advocate for smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses or maybe smaller business units who don't necessarily have a dedicated team that can go off and spend months and weeks and sometimes years solving the problem with a dedicated advocacy for the organization and for their customers. So we wanted to be that unbiased resource to help them, to advise them, to promote what's in their best interest. And it doesn't mean that they aren't going to at some point convert to having to make commercial decisions about who they work with and what technology they implement, but making sure that they feel that they're doing that with the best possible information to make those decisions. Just as smart manufacturing is all about having the right data to make better decisions. And that's what we want to be all about, is helping them to have the right tools and the right data and the right information, that they have a higher level of confidence as they go forward and make decisions. And we are advocating for their success. That's why we're here.
And to add to that, I mean, even though the Digital Foundry is not our systems integrator, they're not actually designing and deploying our specific solutions. They have been a great sounding board and helped us do design reviews. So again, especially you're early in the journey and you haven't built your own full team of internal experts, to get an outside group of experts who are unbiased to just review and make sure that, the vendors you're working with are not taking you down a path that's going to ultimately not lead to that long-term success. Digital Foundry has already offered up and done reviews with us, and it's been very valuable in just making sure that we're, not going down the wrong path. So they do help in that way as well. A little bit more in the technical weeds.
Yeah, That's great. That's an ecosystem, right? All the way across from awareness to education to understanding to implementation. So, so maybe for the MSA team, if you obviously there'll be other manufacturers out there watching this, and what advice would you give them if they're considering getting started on technology journey, smart manufacturing journey, et cetera? What advice would you give to another manufacturer as they're trying to get started or pick up from where they are?
I think as far as the advice is collaboration. We've said it over and over, but really collaboration and bringing all those groups together. So although this is smart manufacturing, it's not just operations by any means. It really covers your entire organization, whether it's the outputs of the data itself, whether it's having real-time tools, right, to educate our manufacturing associates on what's actually going on. Maybe it's for our end customers. I really believe that the process, the steps we're taking, how we're gaining alignment throughout the organization and including a lot more than just manufacturing is critical to the success of this.
Yeah, and I think the other process is, start at the beginning. We've embraced the slogan, think big, start small, act fast, because I think we understand and I think we anticipate the ongoing challenge of you set that big picture vision, but there's always going to be fuzziness about how you get from today's exact need and today's use case to that big picture vision. And so we are, sometimes maybe overthink the balance between the scalability of the solutions we're looking at. And we have to think about not only the technology, but ultimately what kind of talent are we going to need to deploy this at scale across all of our sites globally. And so, understand. And then the other reality is we're very sensitive to creating a set of tools that can ultimately be enhanced and continually improved by the engineers in the field, not a centralized, a technology group who has to solve all these problems. But how do you make sure that you maintain the ability for those in the field to solve their own problems, but also have the governance to enforce standards and procedures? Because that's where the challenge of scale and distributed control comes in. So we think about that every day. How is this problem solved today? How are we going to solve multiple problems like this tomorrow? And I think you have to do that, but don't get too overwhelmed because you're not going to have the perfect answers out of the gate.
I just think one other thing to add to that, it's a journey, right? Like it really is a journey. It's not a sprint. It's going to be this marathon. We're going to keep going. So I think the big thing, and Sherri said this earlier, there's a lot of engineers, right? And I am one as well. And just thinking that everything has to be perfect, it's not going to be. We need to learn from this stuff. We need to continue to grow and enhance the roadmap and keep going. But I think that's just to add to you. It's a journey, like you just said.
Yeah,
so.
It's definitely a journey.
So sticking with that for a second, how long has the journey been? How long have you been working on this? You've been at this for 15 years, or has this been a 2-week sprint so far? What is it from a timing, specifically around the acceleration framework?
Yeah, this has been 9 months. So the Operations Technology Group was kicked off 9 months ago, partnered with the Digital Foundry, started work with Sesame, I believe, in the March timeframe, March, April timeframe. So yeah, it's been only 9 months so far. I would argue there's been pockets, right? You've had pockets of smart manufacturing happening throughout. You have all of, these high performers and people that really, really want to see great things happening. And they've been doing that all throughout our organization, but it hasn't been a really main focus like this over the 9 months that it has been.
And we are working on a number of pilots, but I think the reason we're doing this simultaneously is that, I think we've all heard the term pilot purgatory, the dreaded pilot purgatory. Yep. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, I think with Sherri's group, is how do we make sure that we don't end up in pilot? What are the things we need to do today to make sure that we are learning and building on every one of these pilots that we do in a way that gets us ahead and not just plateau? And that's a really important piece, I think.
I'm wondering if has your perspective changed, or has your organization's perspective changed on what smart manufacturing is through working through this process. I meet a lot of people who organizationally, there's one person that's, the person that has this for the entire organization. And when we start to talk about really what needs to happen, they realize that this involves so many more people than just an individual. So I'm wondering from I guess an individual perspective and maybe from a corporate perspective, has your perspective changed at all? What you thought smart manufacturing was and how you look at it today?
From a personal level, I'll speak on, and it absolutely has. I just think back to, especially being an industrial engineer right out on the line, what I thought smart manufacturing was. I almost felt like it was our responsibility completely, right? And then through this journey, I've really gotten to see, because industrial engineers focus on process improvements, they're looking at ways to, eliminate ergonomic issues or whatever it may be. And that was really like my personal thought behind this until we really started partnering on some of this and getting further education, going to different seminars, webinars, whatever it may be. But it has absolutely evolved and changed. And I think it'll continue to honestly evolve and change as we continue to learn and technologies grow and advance.
Yeah, for me, I guess I'd say there weren't completely new thoughts, but they absolutely, light bulbs went off that made things clear for me and crystallized them much better throughout this process. We talked earlier about digital transformation and operational excellence really being the same thing, but earlier in my career, I went through several lean transformations, and the term that always stuck with me was that you're detangling the spaghetti. You're taking these functional silos and breaking them into much more flow-oriented. And I think the light bulb is that we have our data and technology trapped, and you have to detangle that data spaghetti and those data silos. It's really very much the same concept. And that's why I think it stalled until recent years in digital transformation, because the technology really wasn't there yet to actually do it successfully and to make it be part of the same thing. But it's become clear to me that, for us to solve the problem, we need to unleash the data and make it much more readily accessible, much easier to collect, transform, and store. And we're working on that with the Digital Foundry and some of our systems integrators. But for me, it's like, okay, this is just the next level of lean manufacturing. And I think that just became clear through this process.
Sherri, how about you from your perspective as the outside coach working with the team here? Have you seen any perspectives change that the folks that are in the weeds might not have been able to recognize?
Oh yeah, it's been very rewarding because Jennifer and John both talk about these times when kind of the light bulb goes off for individuals or for the team, and to be able to be there and to witness that, you see it where all of a sudden it's like, now we get it, or they start to come together, they start to have kind of a common goal. And I think that a key learning for me through this is this process, while it creates a tool set and a framework, it's as individual as the companies and the team that's participating in it. You have to kind of trust in the process, and you have to kind of let it flow with the organization and kind of where they are, where they want to be, how they work together. So there was a lot of learning to kind of trust the process to work out as you go along. But it's been very rewarding to see when you have those kind of aha moments, and to be able to be a part of helping them to get there. And we hope to have a chance to do that with many other organizations.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, we talked before, I'm a big believer in this. I've been in this industry a long, long time, and this really is encouraging to me to see the synergies that are happening here, to have a national body that's creating a framework, to have regional leaders that are engaging with it and championing their manufacturing base, coaching them, educating them on how to do this with and for themselves. Maybe just one thing, what I'd like to do is everybody just, have a key takeaway or insight you'd want to share as we try to wrap up here. But I was just thinking, Sherri, from your perspective, is there anything, I guess, from the process perspective, the what you're trying to accomplish in the region, or maybe just comment for a second on the opportunity you see in front to have an impact beyond just with MSA, but with others in your region.
Right. So as I said, it's very individualized. And I think that, as you go to smaller organizations, the challenge becomes even greater. And so I think continuing to evolve this tool, and more importantly, the way we use it and kind of customize it for the needs of the organization is going to be when we have the most success, because we look at these businesses who have, some of them been in the area for, in the case of MSA, over a century, in the case of a lot of the smaller family-owned businesses, for decades. We want them to be strong and providing those good paying jobs for decades to come. And we recognize that this is a key to helping them to get there, is if they're going to stay competitive, if they're going to stay on the leading edge, if they're going to continue to attract the best talent to our region and to their businesses. I think that this is very important to continue to develop, refine, use whatever tool sets there are in a way that is not a cookie cutter, one size fits all, but where are you? Where's your culture? Where do you want to go? And you don't have to jump out of the gate and do it in as big a way as MSA, but start somewhere, because this is all about your future and the next generation. And so we want to keep the focus on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I'd like to give you each an opportunity just to share sort of one takeaway here as we go to close. Maybe I'll start with John and just say, if you want to share one takeaway for folks from today's discussion.
Sure. I've been on both sides of it as a consultant most of my career, and now on the inside. And I think one of the other things we've embraced is going outside and bringing best practice back into the organization. And we've done that with a lot of several organizations and a lot of conferences and a lot of peer benchmarking. But I think the real value to recognize is that even if you're good at this kind of thing, sometimes you're just too close to it. And I mean, I can already think of times when we internally got stuck on something, and an outside set of eyes and experts that come from the Digital Foundry saw a clear way forward that just somehow eluded us. So I think there's real value in that outside set of eyes to help you do this. And I think there's also value in that outside perspective to help you build consensus internally, right, as an independent voice and an unbiased voice, both with internal and also unbiased in terms of technology. So it's been really helpful for us.
That's wonderful. Jennifer, how about you? Any key takeaway?
Yeah, I think just in closing, for me, really, if you can go into this with having a growth mindset, being open-minded, being intellectually curious, bringing the outside in, like all of those behaviors are critical to really understanding and being able to put this together and then continue to evolve. So mine really is around those behaviors and really being growth-minded and open-minded as well. So
that mindset theme, love to hear that. How about you, Sherri? Any takeaway for our audience here today?
So I think John and Jennifer touched on it a lot already, is the collaboration, the willingness to leverage whatever outside help you can get, but it's really all about getting your own team on the same page, taking ownership and getting that buy-in. I mean, I think that's the key takeaway, is that this is all about trying to get your organization in the best possible position, and we will do what we can to help you get there. So I think the key takeaway is just around, seeing that this process can help in driving that internal collaboration, in that internal consensus, which is an important first step in whatever new technology you want to implement.
Well, that's fantastic. I think we should probably stress for people as well that that Sesame is working to roll these tools out nationally. And so there are others like MSA that are using the tools and evolving the tools. And so the intention is that will continue to grow, continue to scale. As you can see on the screen there, you can see the road mapping tools at the link listed there on the Sesame website. So with that, I'd like to thank Jennifer, thank John, thank Sherri for being here. Thank you for what you're doing, your willingness to share I'm a big advocate for the value of this kind of learning. I think for people to see that you're doing this, see that you're doing it with a smile on your face is a positive thing, and hopefully reassuring for folks that they can do it themselves. So also want to thank SME, Sesame's partner here, for delivering this webcast series and helping us build out the smart manufacturing ecosystem and hopefully instilling the proper mindset. So again, I will encourage everybody to get to know Sesame. You can follow them on LinkedIn. You can look them up on the website at sesame.org. Also, you can stream previous versions of these events on both Apple Music or Spotify as podcasts. And you can join us again next month as we have our next LinkedIn Live series, the Smart Manufacturing Mindset event. Now, we typically host those events the last Tuesday of every month. But next month, we have a special session that's going to be held on Wednesday, October 25th. We're going to be broadcasting live from the Sesame member meeting, which will be held at as part of SME Smart Manufacturing Experience event at South Tech. So you can join in Greenville, South Carolina in person to witness this if you like, or you can join us online. And we will be featuring the public launch of the U.S. car Smart Manufacturing Roadmap for the Automotive Industry, which was developed in partnership with CESMII. The U.S. CAR stands for the U.S. Council on Automotive Research, which consists of organizations like Ford, GM, and Stellantis. So until then, we remind you that when you think about smart manufacturing, think differently. Thanks, everybody.